Hello, this is Danielle Channels Planets, and I am reporting the astro weather from an archetypal astrology perspective for Thursday, April 23rd. And a lot of these transits are going to be going on for the rest of April into early May. So I'm just going to take a look here at the chart that I have pulled up and specifically focus on the planetary archetypes and the aspects they are making to each other. Now, these are always just potentials. This is not a set in stone predictable situation here with astrology. Nevertheless, it is archetypally predictive. So that is my aim, to assist people out there with their individuation journeys and their personal growth. One of the first things about Thursday the 23rd moving into Friday the 24th is that the moon has been in a T-square aspect with Pluto and the Sun. So specifically more on Thursday, April 23rd, it's going to feel a bit more punchy. It's going to feel a little bit more emotional. It's going to feel like there's some repressed emotional contents that are surfacing from the unconscious, like dread or guilt or shame or repressed anger that Pluto tends to now force a confrontation with. So when Pluto is in an opposition with the moon, there might not be, there's a tension there with Thursday particularly. Maybe it softens a little bit by Friday, but nevertheless, there's still a residual opposition that's going on. And the moon-Pluto aspect in itself is really asking us to confront our inner child, our inner world, our sense of home and safety, and Pluto is necessitating that we integrate something related to personal power, sexuality, projections. We can feel like our inner child has reached an extreme limit of something and therefore necessitating a transformation of some kind. Now, an aspect with the Sun on top of that, which is going to be stronger before it's T-square with the moon and after. So this Sun-Pluto square is going to be exact moving into the weekend. And Pluto transits have more than a death underworld flavor to them. They can always feel that way at first, especially if we don't confront the way that Pluto is showing up in our lives. But when we do, Pluto has a transformative mythological sequence to it that unfolds, such as Kore, the goddess, being abducted to Hades' underworld. And then in the end, she becomes queen of the underworld and is able to traverse between both realms, the underworld and the upper world, to see her mother and then come back down. And so that's a metaphor for the plutonic transformation cycles that we go through. We're not meant to get stuck in the underworld. We're meant to courageously go down there like Inanna did visiting her sister Ereshkigal. Now, Inanna can be the sun here, and Inanna ends up getting torn to shreds and hung on a meat hook for several days. So that is definitely part of the journey here with the heroic ego, and perhaps our heart and our souls and our inner child are also descending into some kind of hellish landscape. And we need to have our wits about us. I mean, Inanna, in the end, she is rescued, and she does return to the realm of the gods outside of Ereshkigal's realm, which is in the underworld, and Inanna is forever changed. So that is kind of the cycle that we're all going through in some way. We can't necessarily predict what the butterfly is going to look like coming out of the chrysalis, just because it's very unique to each person. But if there is a going within and a descent, that is not the full completion of the story, although that is probably one of the hardest, trickiest, scariest journeys to go on. Pluto necessitates we confront our deepest fears. So there is something about this week and moving through the rest of April that invites us to tap into our sense of identity and our sense of ego strength, and to not fall apart and crumble in the face of whatever's arising in our relationships, in our workplace, in ourselves, in different aspects of our lives, that to have the courage to make the descent, to look at it, that to go and to make that journey. While it's not climbing a mountain and maybe people won't see and congratulate you, it is the journey of descent. And the journey of descent is about self-empowerment, it's about transformation, it's about integration with the unconscious material, and it can lead towards deeper wholeness. Pluto is a very alchemical archetype that invites us to burn in the fires of hell, go through some kind of death, then to be reborn into a new life. And so if we can walk with Pluto gracefully and recognize where it's showing up in our lives, then, you know, it's not necessarily about trust or not trusting it. It's more so about staying in your sense of whole self, even when destruction happens out here. That's a very important lesson with astrology, is to maintain a cohesive and coherent sense of self and a strong enough healthy ego to withstand the influx of archetypal compulsions and pressures that are within us and happening outside of us all the time. So this is a very complex driven weekend, I would say, depending on where this is falling in your chart. Now, if you have something in the fixed signs like Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, like that might be hitting you harder, because that would put this in a T-square with your natal planets. And so I could see that being particularly difficult, depending on if you have any placements there, just because that would also be making a square and an opposition, which are the most tense, hard aspects that we can get. If you'd like a personal reading, please reach out. I'd love to share more about the archetypal approach and individuation. So, okay, so that is a story that remains to be completed, and I will be reporting more on that tomorrow and Friday. Now, further, we have an ongoing sextile from Pluto to Uranus and Neptune. So yeah, I mean, this is you know, it's not just Plutonic alchemy here. This is a deeper alchemy of restructuring a whole vision for our lives. You know, like our whole relationship to the transcendent and what how we feel connected to the greater humanity, how we feel to a bigger meaning beyond ourselves, and a restructuring of our entire imagination and fantasy realm in terms of what vision leads us forward. And I would say at this point, the rest of April, that it's a little bit under construction still in terms of the inner psyche, and perhaps knowing exactly, you know, is this crisis in our personal lives, or is this fear from the past creeping up, and it's okay to trust, and it's okay to stay grounded. Now, Neptune can bring up delusions, it can bring up fantasies, it can really dissolve the Saturnian structure, and with these two still in a pretty tight orb, I mean, this can really be going on for until Neptune Saturn separate by 15 degrees. So that would really be like the rest of 2026 here, of working through a reconstruction around our dreams, our fantasies, and trusting what comes through. And so that's kind of like, you know, I wonder if other people out there are kind of feeling like they're not sure what their sense of spirituality is, or their connection to the divine might be changing or shifting, or yeah, Pluto tends to transform, and Neptune can be images of the transcendent, of gods and goddesses, or the divine. And with the conjunction and the interaction with Saturn and Pluto can really, you know, heavily define this era of humanity and of culture as bringing forth new ways of being and new imaginative and creative and spiritual possibilities. But at first things fall apart to create space for that to come through and for things to be reimagined. And Saturn-Pluto tends to invite a crisis that necessitates us using our imagination to get through it. And that was one of Jung's main proponents, was using the imagination to navigate personal crisis, and to look within oneself and to imagine into symptoms, imagine into emotions, imagine into thoughts. And that helps alchemically transmute our symptoms that we have into a deeper sense of wholeness. And so the imagination is Neptune, and inner parts and divine figures and archetypal images. And I think the crisis that's being born from Saturn-Pluto at this time is absolutely necessitating the use of the imagination as a tool. So spiritual practices, yes, but those that specifically target dreams and the imagination to bring forth healing images, and that would be the highest expression of Neptune, is these healing images of divine encounters. For example, I've been working with Aries a lot, and Aries is the baby, is one expression of the inner child, but not just the inner child, but like the baby child. And we all have connection to the archetypal child in one way or another, to varying degrees. And but working with a baby image, that can have babies can have a multiple variety of expressions, but they're very emotional. And the collective image of the baby child that's kind of going on right now is that of a very colicky, screaming, petrified, fearful child that's constantly in the background of our bodies and in our collective. And one way of transmuting that is recognizing that the child archetype is connected to the sun and the solar principle, because they're associated with the self. And so sun, child, self are correlate to images of self. And if you think about and imagine into the sound or the vibration of the sun emitting energy, it could be a ah, or the sun could be ah. And by just transmuting that energetic, cathartic release of the baby from that of fear towards a vibration of that of being alive and being energized and combustion and of release and of shining. When we work with inner images like that and help transform our the image that of our own anxiety, our own fear within ourselves into something that liberates the archetype underneath. So by shifting from a screaming baby into that of a shining, bright, energetic, eternally burning sun, eternal, sort of. Suns will burn out into a black hole, but mostly, far beyond our lifetime. So it's just like, this ejecting of pure light that lives within us. It's a metaphor for the center of the personality, the sun, and the center of the personality, the ego, our potential that unfolds, our unique sense of self. And I'll be damned if there's not a star for every person on this planet, even more, a star for every human that will ever be born in our soul, in our universe. And so this, Aries energy that's happening with the Saturn, Neptune being in Aries is an invitation to release some of that fire energy related to the child archetype, which therefore is related to self and our alchemical process of becoming ourselves and of creating and sharing and imagining new images of self, of God, that we can share with humanity. So Saturn can be a bit lonely and oppressive at times, though. Some would say it's in its fall in Aries. However, I think that it can still absolutely come through in positive ways. through a tempering of this fire into discipline, into action, into therapy, into different healing modalities that maybe we haven't tried yet. Maybe we've done a certain kind of therapy for many years, and now the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is an invitation to have a daily discipline or daily spiritual practice in a different kind of modality that maybe leans more towards like solution focused, or maybe more towards like moving through change more quickly rather than like a long-term analytic process. So those are just some possibilities. It could also be coming through in a way where you find yourself engaging physically as a discipline in ways that you haven't before, and finding new or releasing new outlets of that energy. So what else? We also have an ongoing conjunction with Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, and so there's a propensity for conflict or communicating anger in relationships, becoming frustrated, feeling blocked by Saturnian barriers. You know, again, this depends on where it's showing up in your chart, but Saturn tends to put up a boundary and can slow things down, where Mars wants to move forward and go into action, and Mercury wants to communicate that change and move forward and implement and think about. And so we're still in this like tight orb here that will go through the weekend and into next week and pretty much the rest of April. But this can cause frustration. It can also cause depression because Mars is more fiery and active, and Saturn can be a secondary emotion of depression on top of that. So when we can't express our anger, if we can't go into action, if we can't move, or if we can't speak our minds, Mercury, then there's like a Saturnian depression or dread that kind of weighs us down, and then we kind of dissociate and feel disconnected from our reality. And I think that the moon is at first probably quite uncomfortable from that situation this week, but I do believe that by Friday and into the weekend, there could be some kind of supportive turnaround that occurs here, where we realize that we can't live this way and that we need to do whatever we can to support the moon. We need to find ways that help us feel and more connected to ourselves if we're blocked right now. And so I would say, like, there's a propensity to want to make change or go into survival response this week because of Pluto and the moon and the sun. And so we might go into fight or flight mode. We might go into some kind of contingency planning, like, oh my God, I need to make a change now. I need to do this immediately, and this is all blowing up. But I think that the best thing to address first is likely your inner world before you make any changes out here. And that is typically a very alchemical thing to do, is to work with what feelings, what emotions, what thoughts are coming up within yourself, and getting maybe support in journaling or going to therapy or doing some deep inner work or going on a retreat or going on a hike, and really connecting to your inner world so that you can help transmute some of that energy and bring off, split off parts of yourself back into integration, into wholeness. And by doing that transformative depth work, then out here can change. And then we'll know, like, okay, this is definitely something that I need to transform and something that I need to act on that isn't working for me. So whatever's getting activated this week, I would say the best you can is to try to self-reflect first into some kind of spiritual practice, into some kind of self-meditation, into some kind of connection to the divine that is a disciplined structure, and imagine into the wound that's being poked, the suffering that's occurring, the depression that's being stirred, or the emotions that are arising, and to take the energy back into oneself and recycle it. And then the answer will appear out here of where this needs to go. So last but not least, by Thursday this week and into Friday tomorrow, Venus will move into Gemini. So Friday, Saturday, Uranus will also be in Gemini. So we're having this last conjunction here of Uranus, Venus, while they're in Taurus. And then over the weekend, they're going to be moving into Gemini, which is the ingress of any planetary archetype into a new sign. It can be when we really feel that archetypal shift the most, and this transition from earth into air. And there's a lot of ways that this could come through, but just some metaphors for Taurus energy being more earthy, grounded, material focused, harmonious, peace loving, stable, secure, loving creature comforts, pleasure, the five senses, indulging. And then Gemini being Mercury ruled, fast moving, quick minded, logos function of understanding speech, communication, a light dabbling of many topics and understanding, a quick understanding, a quicksilver, the hermetic, Hermes Trismegistus, the messenger of the gods, and the hermetic alchemical process and the unification of opposites, the coming together of masculine and feminine into an androgynous conjunctio, and so yin and yang, and masculine, feminine, solar, lunar, and our understanding of those principles and how we express them, and through our ideas and through communication and through writing and through speech. And so really exciting time creatively. Venus is very creative in a beauty-oriented way, in a values-oriented way. Uranus is very creative and in an erratic and in an insightful and in an electrifying and in an impulsive, surprising kind of way, where we see something that we haven't before. We see it in a way we haven't before that can be unique and original, and if we can allow it to come through and be our weird, unique selves now, that this transit is really inviting us to connect to our authentic selves and start to express that through the throat chakra with Gemini. It's almost moving it from, change and creativity being earth-based and about being grounded and about manipulating and owning money and having things, and now into how can we connect and how can we share ideas and how can we, be more particular with what we're talking about and liberate ourselves through shared communication. And there's so many different ways that this can come through, but it will be an exciting time for technology. It will be an exciting time for artists. It will be an exciting time for, and that's not necessarily all good. It can be disruptive as well. So old structures can collapse as we ingress into the sign, and a lot of new visionary things can come through that can change humanity. So Uranus and Venus are in a sextile to Neptune. And again, we have an outer planet transit to an outer planet is very huge. It's so big. And eventually, throughout the rest of 2026, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are going to be talking. So when all three of those come together, it's really just huge in terms of not just what's going on with culture in the world, but how our own psyches and our own collective unconscious is shifting. So as Uranus moves into Gemini and it hits 0 degrees, it's going to be in a closer aspect to Neptune. And when that happens, I like the idea of magic happening here. I like the idea of new, creative, divine, liberated experiences. I've had, heard some friends maybe reaching for some psychedelic experiences or having some encounters with divine figures coming through for them in new ways that they haven't connected to before, like images of self or higher self in new forms that haven't been yet realized, that can occur spontaneously. So again, a really good time for inner work, a really good time for journaling. I think things can be rapidly shifting right now, where we can feel as if we're going one direction, and then all of a sudden it feels as if we're going to another direction. And depending on where Mercury and the Moon is, and some of these, the more fast-moving planets, as they hit each one of these outer planets, it's oh, now we're having a Uranian, and oh, now we're having a Saturnian, oh, now we're in the Plutonic, and it can kind of really feel like we are in the thick of all of it right now. We're in the fire, and we're in the ocean, and there's big waves, and we're getting blown around in a tornado, and then the house is falling down, And so what the hell are we supposed to do? This weekend, I think, invites us to take it slow. Take it slow, be methodical, go within yourself, do only what's in your control. Day by day. I mean, I keep saying this on my podcast, but that's because Saturn is, with Mars and Mercury, and there's only so much that we can do in a day. I think eventually what will happen is that Pluto is this rumble in the background, and it shakes things up until we can't really ignore it anymore. It just surfaces and it bubbles to the top where it demands integration and confrontation, and if we don't, then it'll happen externally in our lives. And so I think that Pluto is kind of reaching that point as the sun gets to the 5-degree point, and with Pluto in the square, and as Neptune and Saturn are also in a sextile to that, and Uranus, Venus, also having a conversation here with Pluto and with Neptune. I really think that it's coming to a head. Like there are changes on the horizon. It is taking a lot of time. In terms of where the next plan is and what to put our energies towards, it's still a bit wobbly right now in terms of where it's all going to land. Yep, so stay tuned for more updates. I'm definitely going to keep talking about this tomorrow. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and let me know if you have any questions below in the comments. Yep, all right, well, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.